Hello, everybody. Hello, Gary Tabach.
Hello, Yuri. Hello.
I am Yuri Dashevsky. I am running this stream from Brooklyn, New York. Last year, I ran for Congress as a Republican and conservative in congressional district number 8. I lost, obviously, to the biggest man now on the Democratic side of the minority in the U.S. Congress, Hakeem Jeffries. I continue blogging. I continue talking about the issues in the United States. And I'm sitting here with a friend of mine, Captain U.S. Navy, retired Yuri Tabach. He's doing what he's in Kiev, Ukraine. And the reason of our conversation, he has a long storied career. His resume is in front of me. He was the first commissioned officer in the Armed Forces of the United States, and he served in many locations all over the world defending American interests. And his new country, he was born like I did, and was like I was in what was formerly called Soviet Union. We both came to the United States. We love this country dearly. And this stream is recorded. Yuri, forgive my long introduction while you're just sitting there. You
I like
deserve a good little rest. Uh, there'll be a lot of fire down the road. But why are we doing it in English? Mostly we speak in Russian with each other, of course, and with our audiences on YouTube and other platforms. But this time we're doing it to respond to a program that was recently released by Tucker Carlson, a formerly favorite talk show host on Fox News. Where our hearts went out to him because when he was expelled from Fox News, he recorded the program with a retired colonel of the U.S. military, Doug McGregor. And Yuri responded very forcefully on his channel to what Colonel McGregor said. It not just untrue what he said, but I listened to his response to McGregor's stories, and I wanted to pick on something that he did not what Yuri didn't cover in his response. Gary is his name. Gary, Yuri, we have same names just to avoid the confusion in Russian. So Yuri, I have a few questions for you, and it's in continuation of what Colonel McGregor said in his interview with Tucker Carlson. And you're in Kiev now. You were there when the war broke out. We became friends. I recorded when I started to number my videos. My video number 1 was recorded with you. So
I'm a founding father of your channel.
yes, please give me. Let me see this sound is.
Well, I thank you, Yuri, for such a great introduction. First of all, I was your biggest supporter when you ran for Congress, even though I'm not a New York resident. I got to tell you, you lost with dignity, and you lost to a good man. Hakeem is experienced, and he does represent many of our ideas and things like this. I know it's sad to lose, but it's always good to lose to somebody who's a strong. It's not like President Trump who lost or lost his presidency to somebody weak like that. But when you lose to a strong candidate, it's not so bad. And I'm sure you're going to have a better luck next time. Also, today is an Independence Day in Ukraine, and Ukrainians deserve this day more than anyone else. And that is why it was so sad that very respected and loved and a professional man like Carlson did that interview with Colonel McGregor on such a date of a country that's fighting for its freedom, the country that shares our values, shares our American way of life, and wants to be that way and bleeding so hard while everybody's just standing by and watching, and interview that particular individual, when really Tucker Carlson has access to anybody, to General Clark, to General Kellogg, to many respected military leaders who are very well known all around the world, who were big supporters of Ukraine. So that is why I was kind of upset that untrue things are being said. There's no honor in it, especially when the military man does that. Especially when it's a West Point graduate that does that. That is not right. That is absolutely wrong. That offends many of us who have served our country, who've served and delivered American values beyond the American borders. So that's why I had to make that statement and challenge Tucker Carlson and Colonel McGregor to come to Ukraine and see for themselves. Because I'm here. I've been here from day one, and I see what's going on. And I talk to the people at the front. I talk to the soldiers, to the sergeants, to the wounded, to the generals, to the retired ones, to the local population, to the refugees, the ones that went abroad and escaped Ukraine, and to the ones that are just being refugees inside of Ukraine from the occupied territories, to the people who are on occupied territories. I'm not sure Colonel McGregor has spoken to any of these people or heard any of them. I don't know where he gets his information, where he gets his conclusion. Also, as you know, you and I, we've had our channels for a long time, mine is for about 10 years, and it's progressing very, very slowly for a very short period of time. When Congresswoman Sparks addressed the director of FBI, after that, for about 2 weeks, I had like 1,000 people sign up to me a day, and then it went dead again. So there's something wrong with things that are going on. But Colonel McGregor and former Marine Major Scott Ritter, I'm saying former Marine because there are no former Marines. Once a Marine, always a Marine. But in this case, it is a former Marine because he's been dishonored by the Marine Corps. And their channels, there's two spokesmen that are very pro-Russian, pro-Putin, I would even say. Their channels came up right when the war started in February of 2022, and they already have thousands and thousands of people that signed up to them, and they have millions of views. And that's also only happens to somebody like a major KGB Major Shvets and the KGB guys, that all of a sudden their channels
all living in the United States.
Right.
Yuri, just to clarify, you are not supported by any government. Everything you do, you're doing on your own dime.
I'm not. I make a disclosure because I am not supported by anybody, period. Not any company, not any government. I don't get paid by anyone. I don't accept donations from anyone. I do everything is on my own dime, and I do not represent anybody, except I do not represent Ukraine. If anything, I do represent as myself the United States as an American, and no more and nothing more. Not as a military man, because I'm retired. And therefore, yes, it's absolutely just my own. So I wish everybody would make that disclosure so we would know who is on Soros's grants or on a Democratic Party payroll or whatever. But unfortunately, people do not do that.
And you were also kicked out of Moscow as a PNG, persona non grata, during your service as in the NATO head of staff or some.
No.
What was your position there?
Huh? When I was PNG, when I was pronounced persona non grata, I was serving at the U.S. Embassy as an attaché for arms control with the Defense Threat Reduction Agency, with the Ditra, as it's called. And that is another challenge of mine was to Colonel McGregor, is that I'm a fail. I don't know what his rating was. I think he was an artilleryman or something, but I'm not sure. I couldn't find anything really.
I think tanks.
Armor, maybe he was
Something
armor.
like that, yeah.
Very, very respectable combat arms. But I was a fail, what's called a foreign aerial officer, meaning that I was a specialist in this arena, in this area. So I wish you would have talked to me. I wish you would have talked to me about it, and maybe I could have shared something with him. I wish Tucker Carlson would have talked to me, since not only that I was the first Soviet born to be a commissioned officer in the armed forces of the United States, I was also the first foreign aerial officer in the Navy. I was what's called the founding father of the FAO program in the United States Navy, which was actually built on a FAO program in the United States Army. So I could have shared a lot of insights and knowledge with them before they would misspeak and misinform not only American public, but Tucker Carlson is listened by millions of people all around the world. And you and I, we're fans of that man. We've listened to him for many years. So it is very sad when he's misled and misinformed by such people as Colonel McGregor.
He scored a few last night by assisting President Trump in his brilliant paramilitary, I would say, operation of taking over Fox News and the viewership of this channel. But Yuri, this war is unique. This war that we witness now in Ukraine, the invasion of Russia, the aggression of Russia, is unique in a way that the fog of information war is as thick as the fog of the actual war on the ground. And a lot of resources are thrown into the mix, and from all sides, from even unexpected sides sometimes. But I want you to clarify certain matters that we outlined prior to this conversation, and they all have to do with what Colonel McGregor said in his conversation with Tucker Carlson. In particular, he said that the fighting spirit, the patriotic spirit of Russians is much higher than one of the Ukrainian soldiers. And I would like you to describe what you see from day one, basically, of this conflict. How did it go? And please do not make it more propaganda kind of thing, because we are always accused of being non-partial. We are not we are partial. We are not impartial. But please tell, as a witness, what you see now.
Well,
from day one.
You do need a little bit of propaganda when there is such a large-scale war. I mean, a World War II type. I mean, the front is as big as World War II front, and it's a huge army is fighting against a much smaller army, and the smaller army has to fight by the rules of engagement that are accepted by the civilized world, whereas the large army is actually fighting as terrorists. So, but of course, too much propaganda you cannot use too, because people start thinking that you're not being truthful. Talking about being impartial, well, you cannot be impartial. There's one side is wrong, one side is right. So you cannot be impartial and say, "Oh, okay, well, let's be neutral about it." We can't be neutral. The Ukrainians are being killed. The Ukrainians were attacked without any kind of provocation from their side, and that's a fact. That is a fact that the fighting is going on for a long time. It started gradually with Crimea, with and with Donetsk and Lugansk. But and now it's a full, large-scale war that really nobody expected in 21st century, and it's being fought in a criminal way. So you cannot be impartial. We have to take sides, and I've taken this side because I'm here and I see it again. I've been stationed to Russia many times. 3 times I was stationed as an American in Russia. I was stationed in Kazakhstan, in Poland, in Turkey. I know the area probably better than an average individual, and definitely better than Colonel McGregor. So, and you and I, we speak the language, we know the culture and things like that. So I wish they would have talked to us. So we cannot be impartial in that sense. So what is your question again? Run that by me.
No, we want the facts. We want to see if the fighting spirit of the Russian army, the preparedness in particular, training in particular. How would you? Colonel McGregor said it's much higher than the Ukrainian army can muster.
Sorry about it. Okay, well, I don't know where he gets his information, but since you've asked me to be impartial, I will only state things that I know personally, and and my grandparents knew, my grandfathers serving in a Red Army, my father told me serving in a Red Army, and myself that I've experienced dealing with the Soviet and then later on with the Russian military. So as you know, as our grandparents have told us, the Great Patriotic War was not that patriotic. Almost 2 million Russians in the beginning of the war took the side of the Germans. Many Ukrainians took the side of the Germans. They thought that they were liberating them from the communists, from the famine, from the Stalin purges, from the gulags. Then they realized that Hitler is just as crazy as Stalin. So I guess they started to fight. Some of them left, some of them did. But there was not that much of patriotic war as it is presented in the Soviet movies. We know that many front lines, they were a meat fodder, just as the way they're fighting today. Patriotism was based, you either move forward and get killed, and then your family will be left alone, or if you run, you will get killed anyway, because there are units that are blocking you from retreating, meaning that your own troops will shoot at you so you do not retreat. And then your family would get punished because you're a deserter, because you're considered a deserter and a traitor. Then if you get captured by the enemies, no way, there's no excuse for being captured. You cannot, so there is actually an order by Stalin that you cannot retreat. That's considered to be being a traitor, a treachery, and you cannot surrender, definitely, and you cannot be captured by the enemy. So you must commit suicide or whatever. Even if you're knocked out and they capture or whatever the circumstances are, that is not an excuse. Then you have to escape, then you have to fight, then you have to die for it. There's no way. So all of the POWs that returned, we know from the German captivity, were sent to gulags right away. And that is why many of them did not want to return. So you cannot talk about this patriotism during World War II. Then Colonel McGregor, comes from my father and from my friends in Russia. Then Colonel McGregor should know about a thing that's called Dedovshchina, hazing. Terrible, terrible hazing in the Soviet military, where young soldiers are just purely abused, and their recruits. Russians never had a volunteer army like we did, so that you cannot compare that. So talking about a fighting spirit of Russians or being high morale on fighting, I think is wrong. I think it's dead wrong, because they're fighting because they're forced to fight like slaves. They do probably promised a better pay, but they also learned the lessons from Afghanistan, from Vietnam, from Korea, when the Soviets were helping out the communists, that these soldiers are brushed aside and they're not given any credit. So there's very, very little patriotism. On the other hand, the Ukrainians, who have been fighting for their land, and I compare them very often to the Israelis, you could see that at the beginning of the war, there were lines at the recruiting station. They were day and night. They couldn't absorb as many people as they could, because there was just a mass of volunteers trying to go to the front and fight. People that were not professional soldiers, people that never had any relationship to military. They had that very big spirit of going and fighting for their land. They did not want to give up an inch of the land to the Russians. They did not want to be Russians. Most of them, interestingly enough, were from occupied territories. They did not want to be the Russian speakers. If you go to the front today, most of the soldiers speak Russian to each other, especially when it gets, hot, when it gets tough, because everybody needs to understand clear orders. So yes, Colonel McGregor is absolutely wrong about it. As a matter of fact, there's a siren going off right now. Russians are probably trying to bomb on the Independence Day harder than usual. So Colonel McGregor is absolutely wrong regarding the spirit, Ukrainian spirit. When the war started in February of 22, I remind, it's February, it's quite cold outside. A few weeks later, I was at the border to Poland, and I could see where parents would undress their kids to the waist with a magic marker, write telephone numbers and their names, send them across the border, ask us to take the foreigners, to take the kids, the women in the car and drive them across the border into the unknown. They would write their telephone numbers and their names on their, and they would turn around and go to fight. Now now he wants to challenge that spirit of fighting. I've seen men and women, running up to a truck full of weapons, mostly AKs, grabbing them and saying, okay, let's get a team. All right, you're going to be the, like Petro, you're going to be the commander. They just right away, they will form units on the streets and they would go and defend their cities. People that weren't even trained, some of them that were former Soviet soldiers, older men, would show them how to load the AK and how to reload and how to aim right there on the street, how to use a low light anti-tank weapon that's still former Soviet. So that was the people that stopped the Russian advances. Yes, the patriotism, the spirit with time dies out. It's true. People get tired of the war. But there's no way you can compare it to the Russian slaves that are being forced to go. I remind Colonel McGregor of a lesson that I hope, well, maybe they taught that at the Naval Academy, but I'm sure they taught that at the Military Academy as well. That during the Persian and Greek War, the Persian fleet outnumbered Greeks 1 to 10, or maybe even more. I don't remember exactly now. But the Greek admiral came out and he addressed his sailors and he said, tomorrow we're going to have a battle. We're going to have a hugest battle man ever known. And we're going to win. We're going to sink the Persian fleet, even though they outnumber us 1 to 10. Why, he said? Because you're a free man. Because tomorrow you're going to row. You're going to row hard. You're going to row for your country. You're going to row for your wives. You're going to row for your kids. Persians are slaves. They're chained to the deck. They will not row. We will sink them. And they did sink them. So Colonel McGregor, I hope that you can relate this today to the Ukrainian people. Ukrainians are fighting for their land. They're fighting for their homes. They're fighting for their kids. They're rowing very hard. Russians are slaves. They're not fighting. They're not fighting. They're killing a lot of Ukrainians, but they're not fighting.
Gary, war is the time when it's a time of deceit and atrocities. And speaking of atrocities, Russian atrocities are well documented, and we heard about Bucha and other places where unthinkable things were done to peaceful residents. People were killed en masse, mass graves, etc. Anything similar or any cases on the Ukrainian side towards the Russian invaders?
Look, when there is such a war going on, many Ukrainians are very angry. They're very angry and they seek vengeance. There isn't a family in Ukraine that does not know somebody who's already gotten killed or somebody who's gotten wounded badly. Every person in Ukraine knows somebody like that. Very often it's a member of their family. So many of them want vengeance. If you've seen some of the cities of Ukraine that's been just wiped out of the face of the earth, you can see that this is a war of attrition, that this is a war to kill a nation, a complete destruction. So, of course, when you have a military that is put together very quickly, of course, if you have a military that is not 100% professional, and even with professional military, like with with the Brits or us or even Israelis, there are sometimes, because it's a large military, you have people that that could be mentally ill, that could have temporary insanity, that just their nervous system has broken down, and they commit a crime. That happens, unfortunately, but it does happen. Nevertheless, Ukrainians are very disciplined. They try to contain themselves. They try to watch out for each other, but it does happen. It does happen where they mistreat a prisoner of war, or they mistreat a wounded guy and finish him off. That happens. That does happen, but nevertheless, it is more of an exception than a rule. Where on the Russian side, it is a rule. When Colonel McGregor says that the Russians treat POWs very well, again, I welcome him to come to the United States, all expense to Ukraine, all expenses paid. I will introduce him to the POWs that will tell him how they were treated, and will remember how many of them were just burned in the barracks that they were kept in by the Russians, just killed. Also, of course, the International Court has accused Putin of crimes against children, stolen children. He does not mention that. So, he's definitely misrepresenting things, and I'm sure it's not because he doesn't know about them. I don't know what his goal is. I don't know why Mr. Tucker, a very respected man by many of us, chose him to do this, and why he's becoming so popular in the United States. Clearly, his channel is getting investments. Clearly, there are people working for him. It's not like you and I doing this, So there are violations. But if you look at the Russian, if you look at the POWs that come back from Russia that are being exchanged, they look like they're coming out from a concentration camp. It's skin and bones. When you look at the Russian POWs that are returned to Russia, they look like they're well fed. They're not skinny. They're not malnutritioned. They look like they're healthy. So it's again, what Colonel McGregor was saying is simply not true regarding treatment, regarding the crimes that are committed against the Ukrainians. And we see how many civilians are being killed, and how many is it's just it's like Hamas or Hezbollah, just firing rockets at random, and wherever it hits. And just recently, again, it hit a theater, it hit where the kids were killed, and the whole world is just kind of standing and watching by. I don't understand why we cannot close the skies and help the Ukrainians. Also, I do not understand, because we can see when the Russians pulling up a missile or artillery closer to the borders or closer to the front line to bombard a civilian city of Ukraine. Why can't Ukrainians, with our weapons, with the American weaponry or Western weaponry, hit them? In a preemptive strike, so they cannot fire. What Israelis do preemptively? They know that they're going to fire on you. They know they're going to kill now innocent people, but because it is kind of on the Russian side or on the Russian occupied side, the Ukrainians cannot use our weapons. Well, that's ridiculous. So they have to wait for them to fire on Ukrainians, kill Ukrainians, then relocate that artillery piece or that missile launcher. And I'm not sure if it's a fair fight. I'm not sure we're on the right side of history at this point. So Colonel McGregor is wrong at that.
I must say that in my opinion, and there may be more humane people than I am, if a military person with a rank is opening his mouth to talk about the situation, militarily, professionally, etc., he has an obligation to tell the truth. He does not have much of a way of just giving his opinions in the position of Colonel McGregor. going to opinions. I mean, like we do, we can say this thing and then say, "Oh, I'm sorry." It's like 100 degrees otherwise, and he's obligated with such a big bullhorn as Tucker Carlson has. To tell the truth and be informed about what he's talking about. It's just otherwise it becomes a weapon of propaganda. Or it's done intentionally.
That is given, because if you take a Gallup poll, whom American people trust most, which professions? For many years, for as long as I remember, there are two professions that always at the top. The first three, it used to be Catholic priests, now it's elementary school teachers that are number one, but it's always for years, always would number one, number two, number three would be taken by a military officer and a pharmacist. So I actually, I would.
You do both. You have 2 degrees.
But it is given that the military officer tells the truth. So it is given. But I think, so that's why what Colonel McGregor is saying is just simply unacceptable. Simply unacceptable. There's no honor in it. He's violating the code of honor. But Tucker Carlson, who is a respected journalist, which means he has a very high journalistic ethics, should ask those questions, should not just agree simply to what this guy is saying, but ask for proof and have the opposite opinion, somebody else. And please ask me. I'm willing to come and say. I mean, there should be satisfaction. There should be a challenge. Okay, this one side says this side says that. If you're just one-sided as a journalist, then this is not good. Then there is no journalistic ethics. And this is a challenge that I present to Tucker Carlson. Again, we all respect him a lot. He's proven to be a very good journalist, very fair journalist, in my opinion. So I think that there is a problem with that. But Colonel McGregor forgets one very important thing, that I do not expect anyone else to know that, but I expect him to know that. Because a military officer, a senior military officer in the United States, a graduate from West Point, also I believe he went to VMI, Virginia Military Institute, also a very prestigious military institution. He forgets that not only we as Americans, particularly as American officers, who take every year, for as long as I remember, one of the first 3 prizes in American people trusting us is because we have ethics, it's because we have honor. And therefore, even if what he said would have been true, hypothetically speaking, but what he was saying is not true, but even if hypothetically speaking it is true, he forgets to talk about one very important thing. How about moral obligation? How about moral obligation as Americans, as officers, to the people, innocent people who are being slaughtered, who are being killed? We should also, as officers, lead and have a moral obligation. And there certainly should be a moral obligation to the Ukrainian people due to the Budapest Memorandum, due to many promises we made to Ukraine. Also, he was saying that Ukrainians are trying to drag us, Americans, our troops, into this war. It is absolutely not true. All Ukrainians are asking, give them the weapons and they'll finish this war. Just give them the weapons that we promised, that the American people, by and large, by super majority in our Congress, the voice of the American people, voted for Ленд Лиза. Give the weapons, as we did in World War II, to kill this monster. Ukrainians are not asking for our troops to be involved. Colonel McGregor is absolutely wrong with it. They're asking to give them the tools. They will finish the job themselves. So here's again what he was saying is not true about that. And, comparing Budapest Memorandum, which is a document to give up the nuclear weapons for Ukraine, and President Clinton apologized for it. He says, yeah, I guess he was wrong in forcing Ukrainians to do that. But comparing it to some promise that President Bush supposedly gave that the NATO was not going to expand. Where did President Bush said that? Is there a document that was signed by that? Any kind of document? Is there a tape? Is there a video of it? It's just hearsay. And then again, Colonel McGregor, President Bush had no right to speak for the entire NATO. We're partners in NATO, equal partners in NATO. Yes, we pay a large part of it, but we're still equal partners. So how could President Bush promise anything to Yeltsin that or Gorbachev that NATO was not going to expand? This is a free country. The countries, they're sovereign countries.
It's a collective decision.
It's a collective, and these countries are sovereign countries. If they rate and have all the things done to join the club, they should join the club. You can't promise something. So that is hardly comparable, or this is hardly an excuse. Because again, there's no document. There's no some sort of an agreement, an international agreement on that. So comparing that is completely wrong. Also, it is wrong to say that it is a dictatorship in Ukraine. There is no dictatorship. As a matter of fact, you should expect more dictatorship in Ukraine because it is a martial law here. There should be you're fighting a war. You cannot have a democracy fighting a full-scale war. We're defending democracy here. We're not practicing democracy in the military. So you can't say it's not democratic because for instance, they're closing down anti-Ukrainian and pro-Russian TV channels. I mean, we did that in the United States during World War II. That's where the foreign agent law came out. This is what FARA is made for, Foreign Agent Act, which you have to register. So he's saying that this is a dictatorship because they're doing this. Well, yeah, in a sense, maybe there is. But you can't have an enemy, a Nazi or Japanese television in the United States or radio station definitely in 1941, 45. It's ridiculous. So they did. Another thing that I think is absolutely not true is saying that they closed down churches and they're going after clergy. Yes, there's some clergy and some churches are closed, but not all of them, by no means. The Christian church prospers and the Orthodox Christian churches prosper, just not the ones that are loyal to Moscow.
And they run from Moscow. They're not just loyal to Moscow, they run by Moscow. Moscow Patriarchate.
Right, and maybe Colonel McGregor and Tucker Carlson did not know that. But during the Soviet era, churches and any religious institutions were very much infiltrated by KGB agents. So most of those clergy were informants, if not all. So that didn't die with the Soviet Union. So the Moscow Patriarchy, which was closed down in Ukraine once the war started, yeah, and this is where it was proven by the Ukrainian counterintelligence forces. So how could you say that they're closing down the religious institutions and there is no freedom of religion? No, the Orthodox Church prospers in Ukraine. It's just certain one that they found to be pro-Russian or pro-enemy. It's understandable. And there are many things that, and then saying that Putin or insinuating, suggesting that Putin that way by prosecuting LGBT community, that way he is defending Christian values. That is bizarre. Brother Christians, as a Jew, I can tell you, Putin is not promoting or protecting Christian values. Putin is a KGB thug. To say that or to insinuate such thing as Colonel McGregor does with Putin, it's the same thing to say because Hitler was killing gays and Jews, he was promoting Christian values. I mean, that is bizarre to even suggest such thing, that Putin is a cold-blooded killer. He's a terrorist. He's not promoting any Christian values by prosecuting those people. So that is sad. And also, what I was surprised is Colonel McGregor made a claim that is really surprising for any military man, even a naval officer, when he suggested that the weapons that the United States provides to Ukraine are being stolen sold on the black market, and end up with the drug cartels in Mexico, because he saw a picture of one of the drug cartels having a javelin missile on his back. Colonel McGregor, that is not a javelin missile. Even a naval officer can tell it. That is not a javelin anti-armor missile. Looks completely different. Completely different. It's a very unique looking tube. So how could you confuse one for the other? Either you do not know U.S. military weaponry, I mean very, general weaponry, or you're not telling the truth. You're, in a sense, you're purposely not telling the truth. It's one or the other. So it is like saying that when you see some guy having, let's say, a Tavor or some other rifle on his back and say that that's an M16. You can't confuse one for the other.
He also
really.
has a problem with hardware. He says that the American weapons are much inferior to what Russia has technologically. He talks about the Abrams M1 HA1 tanks, saying that they are so vulnerable, so bad compared to the Russian classical, I guess he meant T-34 or T-90 M, those machines. And what, in your opinion, how you on the battlefield, how do they compare with each other, the Russian and Western weapons, and American in particular?
Well, how does everything, I base it on how's everything else compare? How does a Russian medicine compare to the Western medicine? How does a Russian roads compare to the Western road? How do the Russian moon rockets they're supposed to land on the moon compared to even Indian?
Yeah, that one. 25. Indians landed in 3 days later.
I mean, how do you compare Russian Fiat to the Western Mercedes or
listen to the original Fiat, Italian Fiat? So no audio, Yuri. No audio. Yeah, now good. Now it's okay. That's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how do you compare these things? So I will not argue with Colonel McGregor about the armor, because you're saying that he's an armor officer. But I can tell you from my experience from the Desert Storm, where our Abrams killed a lot of Russian tanks, where our Abrams destroyed them, and even Bradleys, which is armored vehicles, infantry armored vehicles, also destroyed a lot of Russian tanks. But I'll agree with Colonel McGregor on that. I'm not going to argue with him. If that's so, why are we giving Ukrainians armor? Then let's give them helicopters. Let's give them killer drones like Predator, so they can destroy Russian tanks without putting themselves in danger. So why are we giving them armor that is not superior to Russian armor? So if he's saying that, then we should promote giving Ukrainians helicopters, attack helicopters, and drones, and attack drones, so they can kill Russian tanks. But we're not doing that. So there is a point. There is a reason. There is a reason why I think why he's saying those things. He's saying those things because he also is playing to the as right as he is. I mean, politically right, to the right. He's really supporting what President Biden is doing, not even the Democratic Party, but what President Biden is doing, saying, well, we're giving Ukrainians enough, and there's corruption there. Yeah, like President Biden should be the one that's talking about corruption, how bad that is. And trying to promote Putin as somebody who is saving the Christian values. I think he's playing up to the Putin and to the to President Biden. He's really not defending what he pledged the allegiance to, to the freedom, to the liberty, to the pursuit of happiness, to what he has supposedly dedicated his entire career to. So I think he's on a wrong team. He's on the wrong side of history. And unfortunately, Tucker Carlson is promoting that man in a way. Without
Yuri, I guess the last question that I have for today to discuss with you, of those that were posited by Colonel McGregor, was that he said that this war was actually started by American neocons. And he was very particular about the neocons. He said that Zelensky was installed, President Zelensky was installed by Ukrainian oligarch Kolomoisky, and Victoria Nuland started what was the Orange Revolution in Ukraine. And basically that the neocons are people whose ancestors, or some of them themselves, were born in Russia, and they felt being oppressed by the people who are in charge in Russia. And this is a long story, and we cannot fight wars because somebody's ancestors were oppressed by Russians. So if you watch this interview, it's absolutely clear that it's a clear anti-Semitic remark by Colonel McGregor. That's what he said. So he basically blames Jews, for American Jews in particular, world Jewry, and the Masonic plot against humanity, etc., all those things. He did say it. I listened to this interview a number of times, probably 3 times, and I will be listening to it again because it's very interesting in terms of showing how some people mislead what's going on there. It mislead the American people, and we know, you know, and I know, and we both are Jews, and we support the war as we support the victory of Ukraine over Russia. In terms of Ukrainians, is just like Golda Meir said: if they stop, Russians stop fighting, the war ends. If they go beyond their border, Ukraine is not going to conquer Russia, believe it or not. If Ukrainians stop fighting, Russia takes over the whole territory. And Russia is ready to go into Poland as well. And so what do you think? Yeah.
And again, remind Colonel McGregor what Golda Meir said, because he's saying that we should negotiate with the Russians. We should negotiate, stop the war, give up the land that Ukrainians have to the Russians, and stop the war. Well, remind him of what Golda Meir said. How can you negotiate with somebody who came to kill you? You can't negotiate with these people, and you cannot negotiate with the KGB thugs. I mean, he has violated every agreement that every memorandum, everything that we have ever signed with Soviet Union and Russia since World War II has violated every one of them. And you want to come sit down at the negotiating table and negotiate something else with him? Well, I think that's pure stupidity, or a crime in a sense. You're committing a crime by doing that against humanity. So, of course, anti-Semitism is the easiest way out of any kind of jam, and unfortunately, it reflects mostly badly on Ukraine. And we can see that again. That is kind of he pretends to be very Republican, but I think he's a rhino in a sense, because this is what President Obama and President Biden have. They have a very lousy relationship with Israel. Our ambassador to Israel is nasty, and so does Ukrainian. And it is very easy to stir the anti-Semitic feelings, especially where the history is not good, considering Jewish-Ukrainian relationship, Jewish-Christian relationships in Eastern Europe. So he's playing up to that thing, what President Biden, continuing President Obama's legacy with the relationship to Israel and to the Jews, even though most of the American Jews support him, which is also nuts. But and then, of course, it gets picked up by the Ukrainian local anti-Semites, and it's put on their television here and everywhere, and that disturbs and takes the attention away from the real enemy, from the Russians. And this is, of course, again, it's a diversion, and I think it's criminal. It is criminal, and that is what why I challenge Colonel McGregor on his statements and on his activity. I do not understand why, compared to all the other military leaders that we have, General Kelly, General Clark, General Mattis, General Petraeus, many of commentators on CNN and on Fox News and everywhere else, known, famous, highly respected generals, and I myself had a couple of interviews with very respected American heroes, colonels and generals, high-ranking officers, why he is picked to be the voice of the American people by Tucker Carlson, somebody who is also very respected journalist. That is a puzzle. That is truly a puzzle to me. It's one-sided, and it is almost sounds like it's been paid by someone. Somebody's somebody selling themselves.
You know, I'm thinking about it long and hard as we all do, and my thinking is that at this point that the people's support, American people's support for the victory and for peace and for Russia to retreat beyond its borders as a result of this war and just stay there and do whatever they want inside
Right.
their territory, inside the country, and take care of their own country is so big. It does not even compare with the official support of the United States of this war. You know, that we have the Democrat Party is a avowed supporter of Ukraine and et cetera, et cetera. But so this is an effort to kind of cut off sympathy for Ukraine of those who are like you and I try to raise funds and help and send money to Ukraine. So this is an attempt to discredit Ukraine in the eyes of those who support Ukrainian people and Ukrainian victory, not through the government, but by the sheer will and desire to be working for good, so to speak, you know, to be on the good side of history. This is what he's doing, and that's why what Colonel McGregor is doing with Tucker Carlson help is, to me, it's evil. Lots of lies. Give respect.
And on this day of Ukrainian independence, I can assure Colonel McGregor that he's suggesting that if we come to negotiations with the Russians and give Putin what he wants, that way the war will stop. That will not stop by many reasons. Again, Israel is an example. They've given their land many times. This is not a war over land. This is a war over ideologies. This is a land over darkness and light, over evil and truth, and so forth. And Ukrainian people, even if the government will sign kind of agreements or not agreement, even though I think the government here understands it very clearly, Ukrainian people will not go along with it. These people will go into the sewers and fight from there. These people, from what I saw with the way they acted at the border, going back to the front, kissing their wives and kids goodbye, jumping in the car and driving back. These people will go into the mountains and fight from there. These people will go underwater in the Black Sea, in the Dnieper River, and will fight from the underwater. They will fight from every corner, from every basement that they can find. This is these people, and we saw that in Chechnya when they just fought and fought and fought. The unfortunate part is the Chechen people were a very small nation. The Chechen people were not supported by anyone. Ukrainians are supported by all free-loving, spirited people of the world, by many Americans, by our Congress, and by the free world. And Ukrainians are still a larger force than the Chechens. So these people will continue to fight. So if Colonel McGregor suggests that this will stop the war, no, it will prolong the war. It will prolong the killings. The only way this war is going to stop is when the Russians are beaten and destroyed and are pushed back to where they come from. And the only way that can be done is by giving Ukrainians the proper instruments, the weaponry. Until then, this war will continue in one way or the other.
A little programming suggestion for Tucker Carlson is to go into what's going on with his colleagues on Russian television, Russian journalism, Russian channels, and see that Dr. Goebbels is far in the dust, as they say, you know, as compared to what's going on there. That's a fact. Americans know precious little about what's going on TV and how the population there is whipped daily on every channel with every which way. There is not a pixel on the screen in Russia that is not anti-human, which is not imbibed with fascist Nazi propaganda type of deal, just slightly bent towards the Russian accent on it. So, Yuri, thank you so very much, Captain Tabach.
I want to reinforce one thing. Again, I suggest for Colonel McGregor, Tucker Carlson, and other people, come to Ukraine. It's a beautiful weather here. The food is delicious here. People are extremely friendly. They will be happy to see you here and happy to talk to you. And they'll be happy to show you what Russians, what kind of crimes Russians are committing here. So please come. Please come. Everybody will be very happy to see you here.
Not as safe as Maine, but safer than San Francisco, New York, or Philadelphia. For sure.
Definitely.
Yuri, thank you. Stay safe. Slava Ukraini.
Героям слава.